everyone. Welcome to an exclusive interview with Stephanie Movahhed. She is a seasoned coach and facilitator based in San Francisco. She brings a wealth of experience and diverse background from strategy consulting with BCG to leadership roles at Google and startups. Her passion for nurturing talent and empowering leaders has made her a sought after advisor in the entrepreneurial community. Stephanie will share her insights and expertise in this interview, offering valuable guidance to early stage entrepreneurs. So, Stephanie, over to you. How do you believe your background in large corporations and startups can benefit early stage entrepreneurs? And what lessons from those experiences you often share with them?
First of all, thank you, Swamini, so much for that kind introduction. And thank you for welcoming me here. I'm very excited to be here sharing lessons with your audience and also inspired by what it is that you're doing. Diving right in. So your first question is about my background and why I think that early stage entrepreneurs can benefit from coaching and sort of how I work with early stage entrepreneurs. So yeah, very happy to share. So as you mentioned, I actually started my career in big tech and spent the first chapter of my career climbing the ladder in companies like Google, SurveyMonkey, LinkedIn. And then I also was an early employee at a high growth startup called Persona Identities. Along the way, I realized that really what mattered most to me was helping to build leaders and to help leaders with the challenges of day-to-day work, of which there are many. And I decided to train as a coach, and I did that in 2018. And now I spend all of my time helping, advising leaders, many of whom are leaders in early stage companies. And I think a few of the reasons that early stage founders in general, I think, can particularly benefit from coaching. One is that oftentimes they're being asked to do things that they've never done before. As an early stage founder, you wear so many hats and you're a jack of all trades, a master of none. So having an independent third-party voice who can help you identify the blind spots that you might not necessarily see when it comes to your vision, your strategy, your execution can be very helpful. I also hear from my early stage founder clients that in some ways their lives can be lonely in that they don't have another peer. They may have a co-founder, they may not, but oftentimes they don't have someone, a safe and trusted person with whom to discuss their emotional experience, their fears, their sense that they don't know the answer, because to their teams, they want to present confidence. And so having a coach and engaging in coaching can be a really great space to have sort of that emotional outlet. Sometimes people joke during coaching sessions and they say, this feels like therapy for work. And I would say, who needs therapy for work more than early stage founders? Probably no one.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, as someone deeply involved in leadership development, what are the most crucial traits or skills for entrepreneurs to cultivate in the early stages of building their ventures?
Yeah, I think a few traits that I've seen in successful leaders. The first is listening skills. I think really being able to listen, and I would basically marry listening skills with curiosity. I think being very aware of the right questions to ask, because again, when we're early stage founders and we're building something from scratch, there's so many things that we don't know. And so really asking the right questions, listening to the answers is incredibly important. I think the other thing that's very important for early stage founders is the ability to connect to one's personal values and vision, because again, there isn't someone else necessarily to ask. And so when it comes down to it, when there is a challenge in terms of what is to be done, we have to be able to connect to what it is that we want, the vision that we have. And so I think spending some time up front and being very clear about one's personal and professional values and also vision is incredibly important for early stage founders.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, with your focus on diversity and mentorship, how can early stage entrepreneurs effectively build diverse and inclusive teams from the outset of their companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I do believe that diverse teams are better teams. I think that representation really matters. And for employees, it's important to see them self-represented at all stages of leadership. And so I think for early stage founders, as they're thinking about how to build diverse teams, I think the best way to build diverse teams is to have a diverse network. So really thinking about how can I befriend and make connections with people who are different than me throughout your whole career is the best way to cultivate a diverse network. And then so many early stage companies. So when you're early stage, you don't have a brand. So you don't have a lot of people coming to you saying, hey, I want to work for you. who are you hiring? You're hiring people from your own network. And when you don't have a diverse network, then you don't have a diverse company. So really focusing on how you can diversify your network and meet people from different backgrounds who have different skills. I think that's the best way to foster diversity within your company.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, what strategies do you recommend for early stage entrepreneurs to maintain a healthy work life balance while navigating the demands of building and growing their businesses?
This is a really difficult question. And I do work with a lot of early stage companies. And I oftentimes see that for those founders, it is difficult for them to step away because everything is truly urgent from them. I remember doing an exercise about the difference between urgent and important with a group of early stage founders. And for them, they were like, we can't actually identify anything that doesn't feel both urgent and important. Because I think that is how it feels when you are building a company. It really feels like every single task is make or break. It's life or death. And we know that if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't take time to rest, we won't thrive. And then even more than that, as an early stage founder, eventually when you have a team, you're setting an example for the team of how they can take care of themselves. So a few things that I always encourage all my clients, but especially for early stage founders, really paying attention to what is going to make you thrive. And maybe that's getting enough sleep. Maybe that's making some time for exercise. I think the other thing is healthy connection, the relationships in your life. And so at least on a weekly basis, trying to do something that is related to those things that are not related to your work. So maybe it's one night a week when you sign off early so you can spend time with your partner. Maybe it's prioritizing 2 workouts a week. But I really think our physical and emotional health is going to be incredibly important in making us successful in a sustainable way. There's so much talk about burnout right now. And I think especially in the early stage founder community, we can see folks tending towards burnout. And so that's why setting goals for things that are not just KPIs for your company is so important. And so again, I think things like physical well-being and relationships, it's important to have KPIs for those as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, given your experience in coaching and facilitating various programs, what are some common misconceptions or pitfalls that early stage entrepreneurs should be aware of, and how can they avoid them?
I guess maybe one of the big things is what we just talked about, that the burning yourself out and giving everything to your company, that's the only way to be successful. I just don't believe that. And I think, if you are operating in that way, you might have some level of success, but you won't have sustainable success and you won't have happiness. And so I do think that is a misconception, that this idea that giving everything to the company results in a successful venture. That's one misconception. Another one might be about asking for help. I think it is really important to ask for help. And in fact, folks who ask for help are often the more confident ones versus the people who don't ask for help or are struggling at it alone. So I would also encourage, maybe you're in an early stage such that you don't have any other employees. What resources do you have? That's a question I often ask my clients when they're feeling stuck. What resources do you have? And even if you are at such an early stage that you don't yet have a team, you still do have resources. You have your network. You might have some advisors. You might come out of an institution, an academic institution that's giving you some support. So I would really encourage you to always ask yourself that question: what are the resources that I have available? And, early stage founders are great at this. Be scrappy to try to use all of the resources at your disposal, as opposed to always feeling like you have to do it on your own. And if you have to ask for help, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I also know that you are an investor. So, as an investor, what are some key indicators you look for when evaluating the potential of a startup, particularly in its early stages?
Sure. Yeah. So I've done some angel investing, and I'm also part of a pre-seed stage fund called First Row Investors. And I would say things that excite me, I'm usually interested in the mission of the company. So when I invest in companies, it's companies that are aligned to things that I find really personally meaningful and interesting, either from an industry. So I've made some investments in the HR tech space because, as a coach, I care a lot about leadership development and how companies are treating employees. I've also been really interested in working with diverse founders and female founders because, as I said, I believe that representation really matters. And I want to see a workforce where there are more different types of leaders. And so I would say the things that I look for when I'm investing: number one, Is the problem that the company is trying to solve one that I'm personally interested and passionate about? And then two, I look at the talent. Is the talent that I want to invest in? Because I think like at such an early stage in pre-seed investing, the ideas can change. So the talent is probably the most important thing because that's the one thing that will stay consistent. And so, yeah, I think people that I have relationships with or people that I really want to support are the ones with whom I would invest.
Now, how can early stage entrepreneurs leverage their networks and connections to accelerate the growth for their ventures? And what advice do you have for building and nurturing these relationships effectively?
Yeah, actually, I do a lot of coaching work on networking and how to grow a network. And I think early stage entrepreneurs, it's not so different from anyone else. It's really about not just who you know, but the strength of the connections that you have with those people. And so, what I would encourage you to do is think about how are you giving back to your network? And even before you start a company, you should be doing this so that by the time you start, because once you start a company, and I started my own coaching business, and so I know this very well. You have to ask a lot of people for help and favors. And so before you do that, the hope would be that you are answering a lot of people's requests for help and favors so that you have some karma built up. And so what I would encourage you to do is make a list of people in your life who really love you. And then ask yourself, when was the last time that you did something for that person? And try to think about what is it that I could do to help each of these people. And then also be reaching out, be checking in, be talking to people even when you don't need things, because that is truly who is going to come and support you in your time of need. It's not someone that you met at a networking event once. It's someone who you have history of trust with. And yes, we can grow our networks, but essentially it takes, I think the research says it takes 9 interactions in order to really move from knowing someone to fully trusting them. So you have to think, if you've just met someone once, at that point, they just know you. And how can you move them further along the spectrum from knowing you to actually trusting you? That takes time. And that takes you showing your value, how you can help them. And you probably want to help them 2 or 3 times before you ask them to help you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, what are the most effective strategies for early stage entrepreneurs to validate their business ideas and ensure that they are addressing a genuine market need?
Yeah, so I would say it's definitely all about being close to the customer. So the first thing I would ask is really, does the early stage entrepreneur really understand the customer's pain point? And I also think sometimes I think about this idea of what is the smallest viable market. If you're truly, truly solving a deep problem for one customer, then you can go out and find other customers who also have that pain point. Versus, I think many times people think about building generic solutions that can be used in many ways. And then essentially you're building something that's only somewhat useful to many people, as opposed to something that's extremely useful to a smaller segment of the population. So I would say really spending time with customers to understand their pain points is the most important thing. And then also making sure that your product is very, very tailored to the pain points of a very specific customer subset. And then you can always from there create different use cases. But I think it's super important to start small and be super useful to an extremely narrow customer who will then truly love you and champion you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, how can early stage entrepreneurs effectively prioritize their time and resources to focus on the most critical aspects of their business development?
Yeah, so I would say, I think you really just outlined it. It's really looking on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. What are the most important things that I have to get done? And then putting them in priority, because there's always going to be things as an early stage founder that you cannot do in a given day. And so I would just say being very rigorous about what you are prioritizing, and then also thinking about what you're not going to do, because it is impossible to do everything. And so I would say it's being clear about what your priorities are, and then also being clear about what your priorities are not. So for the things that are not your priority, you have to make sure not to do them so you don't overwhelm yourself with meaningless tasks.
Now, drawing from your diverse background and experiences, what advice would you give to early stage entrepreneurs as they embark on their journey of building and scaling their ventures?
I think the things that is most important, just reflecting back on what I said about my strategy when I'm investing, is people. So who are the people that you want to surround yourself with while you are doing the important work of building your venture? And that can mean who are the friends that you want to have in your life who will support you as you do this difficult work. It can also mean who do you want to advise you as you're trying to solve difficult problems. And then eventually it also means who do you want to build a company alongside when you bring along a co-founder and eventually employees. In my coaching work, I hear many stories about people who, especially on that latter side, partnered with the wrong people when it came to employees and co-founders. And so I think it's really important to be thoughtful about, is this someone that I want to be deeply connected with? Is this someone that I want to spend my time with before you move forward? Because you will end up spending so much of your time with this person, and it has to be someone with whom you feel incredibly aligned. Because if you are not aligned at the beginning, you will not be aligned when the hard problems come. I think it can be easy to feel aligned, so you should be asking hard questions at the beginning to make sure that you are truly aligned.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time. I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure that entrepreneurs will also find a lot of value. So how would you recommend people to connect with you?
Yeah, great question. So I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn. So I welcome folks to connect with me on LinkedIn. And then they can also look at my website. It's www.stephaniemovahhed.com and learn more about the coaching work that I do for my website.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'll be sure to add that in the description below. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Swamini. And I wish you lots of luck and success with this project.
Thank you so much.